I want to thank again the folks from the ARF that have helped put this all together and on. And then it's my great pleasure to introduce Jasper Snyder, another one of our EVPs. He's the EVP of cross-platform measurement, and he also is leading the Knowledge Center. He is someone that I recruited on. I have to tell this story. I recruited to join the RF, and I've been asking him, I'm like, Jasper, you have to come work for me. And so I ran into him at a coffee shop across the street from the RF, and I said, Jasper, you have to come work for me. And I didn't know he had actually gone to work at Ipsos, and which I'll name. And he said, Gail, meet my boss. So he didn't come work for me that day, but subsequently we did kind of figure out how to work together. It's just been an absolute delight and a gift to spend this time working with Jasper at the RF. It's been unforgettable and truly wonderful. And of course, I'm a researcher, so the research kind of guys, as it turns out, at the RF are that's kind of my posse. So Jasper actually hails from Britain, which you're going to hear in just a moment if you haven't previously, and he is just a very gifted researcher, synthesizer. He has a social media background. He was at Conversian after he was at Ipsos, and he, prior to that, is actually a barrister from the UK. So he has actually a law degree, and so he's yet but another ARF impresario. So please join me in welcoming Jasper Snyder to the stage.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. What an introduction. Thank you so much, Gail. So we're going to pivot this afternoon. We're going to explore measurement in the context of mobile creative. We've got three fantastic speakers for you before the next break. And the first session is going to be presented by a real thought leader in mobile measurement. He's going to be talking about mobile app and in-game measurement. And there's one reason, or a couple of reasons, why mobile app measurement is so critical today. If you think about the pace of change, we've seen reams of data talking about the importance of mobile, but specifically on apps. The growth of apps over the last 3 years has doubled, which is 50% faster than the use of the mobile web. So it's a really, really important area. We've got one of the thought leaders today, the founder and CEO of Verto Analytics, is a real entrepreneur in this space. So Hannu, over to you, Hannu Verkasalo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for the introduction, and very glad to be here finally. I think it's been truly like 2 to 3 years. We have been speaking with Gail and back in the day with Peter as well about things like mobile and mobile apps and how that should be part of the agenda with the ARF. With our company, we have a strong tradition with the executives in media measurement back in the days of TV and radio and PC and sites and all of that. With our core business today, we work with leading app companies, ranging from King to all the way to guys like, Facebook, the mobile app teams. And in a way, today I'd like to kind of bring these topics together and talk about the measurement challenges and opportunities and what are the metrics that would really matter in the future of all of us to be able to kind of get better ROI out of mobile apps. And I'm going to make an opening statement by saying that, like always, if we want to measure, let's say, how many people and how much people consume water in the US, I think you would rather measure the consumption of water and what's the daily consumption rather than counting the water pipes. The same applies to energy. Like it's not about the capacity or the installed base, it's about the daily, monthly consumption. And in the same way, in the mobile app world, we have seen downloads being the kind of key measure. Pokemon Go hits 100 million downloads, whatever. But it doesn't make sense for an app company or Starbucks or American Express to think about downloads as the way to kind of monetize. They, of course, monetize through engagement, active users, and it's about that disconnect between the download and the active users and time spent that we see as a major challenge for many of our clients. And I think it's an opportunity for us to kind of have a good dialogue. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more today. Just to give you a bit of background, Verto Analytics, we are based here in New York, San Francisco, and we have a strong base in Europe, in London and Helsinki as well. All about media measurement, cross-device media measurement, and what we do with our methodology is to help a fairly wide set of clients. It's heavy on tech, heavy on internet, heavy on mobile apps, some brands as well using our data, and my key agenda even for this afternoon is to kind of be able to talk a little bit more about the work we have done already with these guys and how should it be applicable for brands and even media agencies. So that's certainly a direction we are taking, and with our data we have two strong bases for the foundation. We do have measurement data we collect from panels. The smart panel we have been operating here in the US for the last 3 years was the first single source panel. We recruit people to install our meters on all the devices they claim they have. As you can figure out, it's not easy, but we have built a high quality population of 30,000 people in the US that we meter across all the devices they use, which is a big thing. Mobile data has been always a strong thing for us, but as a measurement company, we are interested in the wider online world, of course, with our data. All the data we collect from panels is always calibrated and projected against census data we collect from all kinds of platforms, ranging from Google Play App Stores all the way to ad networks. And it's the combination of the two that make the service. Now going a little bit more into the examples. So what we are going to do this afternoon is to kind of take a look at some of the interesting things we have done with our clients so far in the mobile app space. And my key goal is to kind of explain to you a little bit more what's the difference between downloads and users, and then what are the metrics that could help us to quantify the disconnect in a better way. But let's get started by some key questions. Many of our big customers, they are talking about CPI, cost per install. That's how they spend money today. Like if we think about brands today, how they spend money on advertising channels, mobile app guys have spent money on downloads. They have a cost per install, and that's how they spend money. How they make money, it's more about stuff like in-app purchase. People who play games, they spend money in the games. Many of the mobile app companies and gaming companies are finding interesting opportunities with advertising as well. M-commerce apps are used to do transactions, people swiping the mobile wallet app in the stores. But anyways, the key thing is that you don't get money out of the download as an app publisher. And this applies not only for gaming companies, but it applies to anybody like Starbucks as well. And that's the key thing that we're trying to quantify here better with our research today. What's the ROI, and how does that money spent, how does it lead to anybody to make any revenues, and being able to see the connection over there. In terms of the mobile app space in the US, this is something we are doing weekly and monthly. It's just kind of talking about stuff, what's happening, how many companies and how many apps there are in the US who have at least 1 million unique users. Today, 680 apps that have at least 1 million unique users. People spend time 2 hours per day on apps today. In the US, there are 181 million unique users today using mobile apps, so it's a huge domain of users, and it's a big time business for many of these. But what is more interesting is to kind of assess better what is actually done, what's being done with the apps. So this is something where we are using our panel data. So we meter everything, like from downloads to usage, from search words to to e-commerce. So we see everything in the panel for mobile devices, including iOS as well. So what we did with this slide here with one of our clients was to kind of assess how many apps are in the device at any given time. And on a given time in the US, there are 71 apps that are in your device. Some people have 100, some people have 30, but on average 71 apps that are in your device. Some people, they download apps, they uninstall apps, some people just let them accumulate into the device, but 71 apps on average in your device. If we ask the question how many of those are actually used, it's quite a bit lower in terms of the number. So on a monthly basis in the US, there are 25 unique apps people use on average. Again, there are heavy users who use 100 apps a month. Some people use less, but on average it's 25. Weekly basis 18 and daily basis 7. So given an average consumer in the US, Facebook, a couple of games, TripAdvisor, messaging on WhatsApp, it's about 7 distinct apps used per day. We have excluded from this analysis, we have excluded SMS apps and voice calls. Technically they are also apps that people use, but we have only focused on apps that people download typically from App Store. So there's a big disconnect over here. So again, if I if I'm provocative, it doesn't really matter if you're part of the left-hand side, a dark blue column. It doesn't matter if you get the downloads if nobody's using your app. A little bit more about the reach versus engagement. If we list all of the app categories in the US in the order of unique users, we'll see that social media, utilities, productivity, lifestyle shopping, all of those are big time app categories. And many of those, most of these app categories reach at least 100 million unique users today in mobile in the US. But take a look at the games. So that's certainly picking up all the time. It's growing. It's 107 million unique users today. And it's number 6 or 7 here on the list. 7. If you take a look at the time spent, so let's forget users, but let's go into time spent. We're going to see that games will go up quite radically. So in terms of total time spent in the US, social media is still the leading app category, but games are number 2. So again, there's not only disconnect between downloads and users, but there's even a disconnect between users and time spent. In the same way as we measure money spent within apps, there's a disconnect between time spent and money spent. The key is to be able to understand what matters for you and how you understand the conversions. Moving ahead and now talking a little bit more about the framework we have built with some of our customers to kind of understand these discontinuities and these conversions in a better way. So let's take a look at the framework we have built. So that we're thinking about ourselves as being fresh here in that sense, in terms of this framework, but actually many of these thoughts are coming from our lead customers. So many of these customers who see billions of downloads or hundreds of millions of downloads, but they want to make money and they make billions of dollars of revenues, but they understand that it comes from a small base of users rather than those billions of downloads. So that the framework here is basically all about understanding where are the downloads coming from. So on the left hand side, add impressions or referrals, whatever. Then we have a download to take place. First trial usage, people have to not only download the app, but they have to get started with the app. And then there's the first day usage, there's the 7-day retention, 30 days retention. And even if you are able to make sure that the user still plays your game after 30 days, you have to make sure that they also spend money, or you can use those users as in the form of advertising to make money. But anyways, it's a curve. The curve is very different for different categories. But the key is to understand the curve and the kind of conversions over there. And of course, many of these things are able to explain what happens with the curve. It makes sense that you get your app or game to the right demographic group because they're more likely to spend money or use the app still after 30 days. So many of these contextual variables are something we are working quite heavily on. And again, the panel, it's interesting here because we can use the panel to bring all of these things like location, time, demographics to explain the conversion. But this is the framework. In terms of the actual data, it's a little bit busy slide, and we'll make sure that you get the deck after the conference. But I would like to highlight the key thing here. So before the download happens in the mobile app space, before the download happens, we have divided all the possible actions of the users and consumers into 2 buckets. How many of the apps are downloaded when people are in the App Store? So you go to the App Store, you go to Google Play, you go to Apple App Store, you search for a certain game, you take a look at the ranking list of top, finance apps, and you download something. App discovery within the App Store, it's about 63% of all downloads. So out of 100 downloads in the EU, 63 will take place through that channel. An increasing share of app downloads, however, happens via non-App Store discovery. So this means that people still end up to the App Store to download the game or app, but instead of going to the App Store to discover the apps, they will see an ad. They will search the app on Google or Bing. They will see a referral in the Facebook feeds, or they are on Twitter and there's an ad that they are exposed to, and they click the ad and they download the app. So the key thing here is that that's the bigger proportion of that's the growth, that's the trend that's taking place. So more and more of the app companies and gaming companies are spending money to influence this. Is it about search, or is it about spending money on Facebook to get the download happen? So that's something we have seen, and just to give you one slide here, this is different for different categories. So for example, for games, it's 32% of all of the downloads that happen through apps and non-app store referrals. For some of the things like music, it's relatively more. And of course there are things here like Spotify. If you are a Spotify user or Pandora user, you might already be actively using the web service, or you are engaged with Pandora on your PC, and then you will end up to download the app, not because of going to App Store to discover, but there's a referral over there. But there are quite a number of differences between different app categories, which is quite interesting. Anyways, when the download happens, this is across all the apps in the US used over the last few months. So to see the retention from day 0 all the way to day 30, we will see that out of all the apps that are downloaded, about 5% of the apps are still used after 30 days. So it's quite a small number against the downloads. And again, the point here is to kind of understand who are those active users and how to make money with them, and how to get this curve as good as it could be, how to get that conversion improved. And now going a little bit deeper into this, so this retention, I mean the point of course for me as a gaming company would be that, okay, not everybody who download my game is using the game anymore after 30 days, so what, like how can I improve my business? Can I do something differently in a way of getting more people to use the app? And this comes down to things like targeting, being able to understand how is the conversion across demographics or device categories, and how to make sure that you spend the money well, and how to influence the consumer at the right touch points. As an example, talking about the retention, for apps in the m-commerce space, there are no big differences between the two ways of downloading an app. So it doesn't matter if you see an ad for an eBay app, it doesn't matter if you go to the App Store to download the eBay app, so it's the same conversion, it's the same retention for both. However, one of the biggest areas of money today in mobile app install advertising business are the folks like Supercell, like King and EN and Zing and all of those guys. So they spend money to get people to download apps, and over here we see that there's a big difference. So the light blue retention line is for those apps that were downloaded because a referral. So people saw something on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and perhaps the gaming company spent money to make sure that the right consumer saw the ad. And if you compare that to people who randomly go to the App Store, I'm in the mood of playing strategy games today, I'm going to go to the App Store and see what are the top games, and I download something. The difference in terms of retention is quite radical. It's 60, it's 50, it's 55 against something like 30, 35. So if you get 1 million downloads, like many of the games get, and some of those get dozens of millions, if you get 1 million downloads, you will have 200,000 more people after 30 days playing the game if you spend the money in the right way. And this is like simplification, of course. There are many details down here, but the point is that if you take a look at the data on the high level, even you will see radical differences. So again, there's a difference. There's a difference how people get to discover and download your app, and of course these are something you can control. I mean, you can't control consumers' interests, and certain people are interested in games, not everybody, but given that somebody has an interest, it affects and it influences quite a bit the retention, how you get the consumer to learn about your app. Going further, we have been also studying with some of our clients, doesn't matter what's the time of the day when people learn about your app. Doesn't matter if you see an ad on Twitter for a Clash of Clans game in the evening versus in the mornings. We took a look at this on the very high level. And this is actually a finding where we saw that it doesn't really matter. So across the x-axis, so the time of the day for the original download, does the retention of that download, does it differ like between the mornings and evenings? The conclusion is for day 1, day 7, day 30 retention, that there are no strong correlations. It doesn't really matter if people download in the evening or morning, and that's something interesting as well. Many of our clients are spending money on programmatic advertising, getting people to download. So as an example, on the high level, it doesn't matter what's the time people download. There's an interesting correlation here. Like if people happen to download a game or an app late in the evening, not surprisingly, the first day retention is higher, so it's more likely that they will still use the app the next day, perhaps like right away in the morning. So that's an exception of the rule. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. But of course, in the future research in this area, we are quite excited about seeing, does it matter now for certain categories in a more specific way? Or if Starbucks is the client, does it matter for Starbucks users when and how they download the app? And finally, to present something in the sort of dollar values, because this is of course something that everybody can understand and talk about. So there's lots of metrics in the industry about CPI. What's the cost of getting an app installed? What's the cost of a download? And those are typically in the range of $1 to $4 per download. I mean, and there's lots of competition over there, lots of platforms out there. Now, with these metrics we have built to understand the conversion, we calculated on the category level that if you, given that you have to spend like certain amount of money on app downloads, but there are certain downloads that happen also within the App Store. But given those ratios over the we already presented today, given the average retention rates, what's going to be the cost of a 30-day loyal active user for you with the current rates in the US for you to buy downloads? And it's a little bit of a simplification, but the key thing here is that there are radical differences. It's much more expensive to get somebody to download a travel app and get that download to convert into a 30 days active user. It's on average $50 per loyal active user. Music finance are also very, very, very high up there. While, for example, for games, it's much cheaper. The retention rates are better and all of that. Now, what you have to do as an app publisher, doesn't matter if you're a gaming company or if you're an e-commerce player, you have to quantify what's the lifetime value of a consumer who's been using your app for 30 days. So for somebody like eBay, or let's say TripAdvisor, or Booking.com, or whatever, somebody in travel, if they get this user to be active and loyal for 30 days, can they make at least $50 with the consumer across the lifetime? If they can do it, it's profitable. The gaming guys who are using our data today are thinking about the same. Are they able to make at least $13 per user on average? If they do it, it's a profitable game. If it's not, they should kill the game. And that's really something where this measurement data now, coming from many of the same things we've been discussing for decades in the world of TVs and radios, now it's something we have to do in mobile as well. Understand the media buy and monetization and what's the connection over there. So with our framework, we've been now opening up the talk, and I'd like to make sure this ROI in the domain of mobile apps will be something we'll discuss in the future as well. But that's really some thoughts about our existing research on this, and I would be certainly more than happy to address any questions if there's any.
Thank you, Hannu.
Cheers. Thank you very much.